Hi, everybody. It's Deep Work Fast. This is Chris Grimm, and every week for 20 minutes or less, I bring you tools, concepts, and ideas to help you be your best in all the roles that you play at home or at work, right? Boss, coworker, employee, parent, partner, daughter, son, all of them. I want you to be at your best as much as possible, if not all the time. Okay, so today is part 2 of a 3-part series around resolving resentments, old residue from situations that didn't go the way you wanted them to go, and emotional baggage. And so many people say, what is that? And my answer is that it's not always what you think. So emotional baggage, resentment, and residue doesn't always show up in the most obvious ways. And it doesn't mean that you are walking around all the time kind of depressed or, with heavy energy. Now, I do realize some people do that, right? Their style tends to be what I always look for is like they're mad all the time. And there are those people, but most of us don't do that, right? So the emotional baggage, you may be carrying and it is influencing what you're doing all day, every day, and you might not know it. In fact, you might be in denial and think that you're over those situations. And in coaching, oftentimes, what ends up happening is that the person is getting feedback about all of these behaviors that are impacting current relationships with customers, with employees, with your coworker, with your business partner, with your home partner, whatever, but you actually don't see them. And maybe because those old situations, you think no one knows about them, or you believe that you've forgiven and forgotten. Forgive and forget. But I'm here to tell you that most often I find we don't realize we haven't cleaned it all up. So even if we have forgiven, there still might be residue. So this week I want to get back into the list of signs that are in the blog that you could be carrying around stuff that needs cleaned up. I want to talk about passive aggressive behavior. If you don't know what that is, it is behavior that is aggressive, but it's not aggressive. It is not fighting. It's not maybe out front and direct. It's not overt and like going head on with the issue. It is passive, which means you may do things to avoid talking about the thing. Now, in the workplace, passive aggressive behaviors might look like not inviting someone to a meeting. I mean, like someone who maybe should be in the meeting, or someone who cares about the topics that you're going to have in the meeting. But let's pretend that in the past, when they've been in the meetings, they don't always agree with you. And they might vote no on the idea that you are putting forth to the boss as a recommendation. And so a passive aggressive way of dealing with that would be to knock them off the invite list. Happens all the time, by the way. Another passive aggressive thing that I see happening is for a boss, for instance, who doesn't want to give a person direct feedback about their behavior, might send an article to the person to read about a topic like better delegation or managing a team, right? So instead of having a direct conversation and saying out loud, I need you to do this, please work on this skill, you're not great at it. They don't want to do that. So they send them articles or have HR send them things or whatever instead of being direct. At home, passive aggressive behavior might look like scheduling over something that you knew was important to someone else, but you didn't really want to attend it, right? Oh, sorry, we can't go to that thing because I've got to go to a work trip, not the ballet that you really wanted to go to. Happens. So passive aggressive, it is non-direct, right? You're not going head on. You're not speaking truth. And as I was saying last week, and it's important, passive aggressive behavior can also be cynical behavior, joking about topics that if you were being serious, you would tell the person, hey, you hurt my feelings, but instead you send them a meme or you make a joke about it or you are cynical about it. And instead of giving them feedback about something, you might actually like make jokes about it, about them, calling them a funny name, or making a side joke about how they talk too much in meetings, whatever, instead of giving direct speak truth feedback to the person, like when you do this, it's not helpful, or when you do this, it hurts my feelings. That would be assertive and appropriate. Okay, enough about passive aggressiveness. Another way that things show up that is important, and some people say to me, what does this have to do with work? So it's important. It's a lack of emotional intimacy. So let me just say, in the workplace, there is an appropriate level of emotional intimacy, specifically with the people that you work with every day. Right? So you and your team members, the people who you need and they need you to get things done. And the right level of emotional intimacy should support trust. It should be the right level of interaction with boundaries around vulnerability, being honest with people about not only how you feel, but when you're afraid something in the business might be in danger of failing, like we might not meet that deadline. What I see in the workplace all the time is that when people, specifically a boss and direct reports or other team members, can't have the right safe intimacy with each other to have hard conversations proactively, well, things fall apart. We miss deadlines. We end up having to call each other out on behavior, like on teams when you have ground rules, and maybe you have people that aren't upholding the ground rules. Like maybe you have a ground rule that says start meetings on time and end on time. And I know you might be thinking, what does this have to do with emotional intimacy? Well, what it has to do with is if you don't have the ability to safely have conversations with people about the things that matter, you won't. And that means you have to then potentially wait until something comes to a head, or you have to call them out on something because you didn't have the intimacy built into the relationship. First, for the person to just own it and be vulnerable about whatever it is that's happening and own the behavior that might not be working, but that you also might not feel like you have permission or the ability to tell the person exactly how you feel. Now, in our personal relationships with the people that we live with, our children, our partners, our broad family members, right? Our extended family members, emotional intimacy is different than work, obviously, or I hope they are. In your personal relationships, you should be able to tell the truth. But in many of our families, and I feel like this is an important thing to note because people say it to me all the time, there are some cultures that are more reserved than other cultures. There are some families that have their own culture, right? Your tribe, your family's way of handling things. I came from a family where half of my family was a large Italian family. And that family had a very, very different than the other side of my family, my mom and dad's families, right? The other one was a little bit more reserved, less direct, but my Italian side, not so reserved, very, very direct, sometimes way with no boundaries, like in the middle of dinner, big topics could come right out. And so those were two very different ways of interacting with each other. So what you need to do is you need to be super clear about what is your family of origin and how did that family engage with each other? Like, can your family members and do your family members tell the truth to each other? And I've coached many, many people, and I've seen people who come from families where they tell me their extended family doesn't tell each other the truth. And then, of course, something bad happens, like someone goes bankrupt, or they get a divorce, or their child has to go to rehab. Real life, right? And nobody knows about it. And people get their feelings hurt. Like, how could they have not have told me that that was happening? that is an indicator that there is a lack of safety for emotional intimacy. And so if you come from a family or a culture where it's not normal to speak directly with people about what's happening, about how you feel, about your authentic self, about why you make certain decisions or not, and instead the culture is to hide those things like it's none of their business, and so we keep secrets, and or like I said, we lie or withhold, or we avoid anybody knowing what's really going on. Well, one, you should know that about yourself. Not so that you can shame yourself or feel guilty, but you need to know, and then you need to know then how that frames sometimes your ability and willingness to be emotionally intimate in the other relationships that you have. And like I said, we all have a range of relationships. And I find the more self-awareness we have around our personal tendencies, where we feel safe, how we engage when we don't feel safe, how do we engage when we do feel safe. I know for me, when I feel safe with people, I'm very, very confident. I'm also super direct, and not everybody else can handle that. And those are the kind of relationship dynamics that sometimes can impact how fast or slow a project goes, or the ability to work with other people or to live with other people, right? So you should know that. And you should know that if it is resulting, this concept here, in shallow relationships, disconnect, in relationships where you do want to have influence and you want to have connection with people, then you probably want to do some work around this. And this is definitely a topic that can be a little touchy. And I then refer people sometimes to therapy so that you can work out whatever the emotional baggage or the old situations or the family dynamics that you might have inherited, that you're bringing into your world every day, and you go, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. I know I've done that. I've worked on dynamics that I didn't want to be generationally bound to just function that way, just because my family of origin functioned that way. And that would be healthy. You taking control of your life and getting the help you need so that you can be your best, regardless of what you inherited or what you learned in your home. If it's not effective or you're ready to outgrow it, guess what? You're an adult. You should do that. Okay, so let's talk about also impacts on mental health and the signs that you could have residue and emotional baggage and resentment and bitterness in your body, even though intellectually you might not want to deal with it. And so you're just muscling through every day and you're going with it. So first of all, you have to think about mental health. So constant chronic anxiety, depression, and stress should be an indicator that you might need to unpack something with a professional. Now, I'm a huge fan of not just talk therapy, but all the other kinds of alternative therapies that are out there. I've mentioned before somatic experiencing as one. EMDR is one of those. That there are many. I would say to you, you can't just talk your way out of situations that you've held your whole life. So if that baggage is showing up and it's causing stress in your current life, get some help and get the right help, and maybe not just talk therapy, but other therapies to help you get it out of your body. Because like I said in the last video, but if you didn't watch that one, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's a fantastic read to start to understand about how when we don't speak truth, when we've been in situations that didn't get resolved and we still are carrying it, we're mad about it. That's sitting in your body and it has to come out in some way. And sooner or later, it can either make you explode like a volcano in a situation that has nothing to do with that old situation, or it might just be a related trigger. But also over time, it can impact your confidence. You could feel like an imposter. You can get super paranoid about interactions with other people. I've seen all kinds of manifestations of this in people's mental and emotional and their physical health when they're not actually cleaning up the old stuff. And like I said, we're all really busy. And so what I find in coaching is that if people are moving really fast, they don't really want to sit in the discomfort that they are believing would be to clean up that old stuff. And so I'm going to urge you again to check out our blog, to make sure you go through the 8 things that I think are signs that we all should know for ourselves and other people, that maybe there's stuff under the surface, old baggage, or like I said, just think about it as residue, right? Every interaction we have with people, usually it's not neutral, right? Something goes in. And I usually think about relationships as kind of like a funnel where every time we interact with each other, something's going in there. Now, we want it to go through clean and we want it to be hopefully positive. And if it isn't a positive interaction, I want to make sure that you have the tools to resolve it and clean it up so it doesn't go forward with you. That you feel like it's resolved and hopefully the other people feel it's resolved so it doesn't come back around. That's not efficient. It's not effective. It doesn't feel good. So why, right? And that's just going to mean we're all going to have to grow out of old norms, old practices that for generations, I know people swept stuff under the rug. They didn't talk about it. I know even in my own family, there are people who held grudges for like decades. And I'm like, we're better than that. I'm not doing that. I don't want my kids to do that. I don't want you to do that. And I don't want your kids to do that, which means we as the adults have to choose differently. And there's a lot more ways and tools out there than there ever have been. So I want to thank you for joining me today. I want to urge you to click on that blog, read what I have to say, really start to think about this, and then let's clean it up. And next week, I'm going to talk about the process of resolution and what it takes to actually clean the residue out of your funnels and have fantastic working relationships, even if things in the past weren't that great. Okay, I'll see you next week. Bye.